Around the 12th century before Common Era, the magnificent city of Troy stood proudly beside the Aegean Sea. Protected by towering stone walls, it was one of the richest and most powerful kingdoms of the ancient world. King Priam ruled Troy with wisdom and experience, while his son, Prince Paris, grew into a handsome young prince whose choices would one day change history forever. Across the sea in Sparta, Prince Paris was welcomed as an honored guest by King Menelaus. During his visit, he met Queen Helen, whose extraordinary beauty was admired throughout the ancient world. As the days passed, Paris and Helen spent more time together. Their growing affection would soon spark one of the greatest conflicts ever remembered in ancient history. One quiet morning, Paris sailed away from Sparta with Helen aboard his ship. Together they crossed the Aegean Sea, leaving behind a kingdom that would soon demand justice. When King Menelaus returned to his palace and discovered that Helen had disappeared, he was overcome with anger and vowed to bring her back, no matter the cost. Menelaus traveled to Mycenae and sought the help of his powerful brother, King Agamemnon. Together, they decided that Troy must answer for what had happened. Agamemnon called the greatest Greek kings and warriors to unite. Among those who answered were the fearless Achilles and the clever Odysseus, ready to wage war against Troy. Thousands of Greek soldiers gathered at the harbor as hundreds of ships prepared for the greatest military expedition the ancient world had ever seen. With their sails filled by the wind, the mighty Greek fleet crossed the Aegean Sea toward Troy, beginning a legendary war that would be remembered for thousands of years. The Greek fleet finally reached the shores of Troy, and thousands of warriors stepped onto the land, ready to begin a war that would decide the fate of two great kingdoms. From the towering walls of Troy, King Priam and Prince Hector watched the enormous Greek army gather below, knowing that a long and deadly conflict had begun. Inside the Greek camp, Agamemnon, Achilles, and Odysseus met to plan their first attack, determined to break through Troy's mighty defenses. Beyond the city gates, Hector organized the Trojan army, encouraging his soldiers to defend their families, their king, and their homeland with unwavering courage. As the sun rose over the battlefield, the Greek and Trojan armies charged toward one another, shaking the earth with the thunder of shields, spears, and marching warriors. Achilles fought with unmatched speed and strength, cutting through enemy lines and proving why he was feared as Greece's greatest warrior. Refusing to surrender, Hector led a powerful counterattack that forced the Greek army to retreat, showing that Troy would not fall easily. As the battle paused, Achilles and Hector faced each other across the battlefield. Although neither attacked, both knew the day would come when only one of them would survive. That evening, King Priam, Prince Paris, and Helen looked across the battlefield from the palace, watching smoke rise into the evening sky as both sides prepared for another day of war. When darkness covered the land, the Greek commanders gathered around a campfire, planning new strategies that they hoped would finally bring the mighty city of Troy to its knees. As the war continued, a bitter argument broke out between King Agamemnon and Achilles. Their anger divided the Greek army at the worst possible time. Feeling deeply insulted, Achilles refused to fight. He returned to his tent, leaving the battlefield without its greatest warrior. Seeing that Achilles was gone, Hector led the Trojan army in a fierce attack, pushing the Greeks back toward their ships. Despite Odysseus and Agamemnon's efforts to hold the battle line, the Trojans continued to gain ground, and the Greek army suffered heavy losses. Unable to watch his friends fall, Patroclus begged Achilles to let him wear his famous armor and lead the Greeks into battle in his place. Wearing Achilles' armor, Patroclus charged across the battlefield, giving the Greek soldiers new hope as they drove the Trojans backward. Believing he was facing Achilles himself, Hector accepted the challenge and fought Patroclus in a fierce duel before both armies. After a long and brutal fight, Hector struck down Patroclus. As he removed the helmet, he realized the fallen warrior was not Achilles. When the heartbreaking news reached Achilles, he was overwhelmed with grief and blamed himself for the death of his closest friend. Burning with sorrow and a desire for justice, Achilles put on his armor once again and prepared to face Hector in the battle that would decide the fate of Troy. At the first light of dawn, Achilles returned to the battlefield wearing his shining bronze armor. The Greek soldiers cheered as their greatest warrior marched toward Troy once again. Driven by grief and determination, Achilles fought with unmatched strength, forcing the Trojan army to retreat toward the safety of the city walls. From the gates of Troy, King Priam begged his son Hector to return inside the city. But Hector chose to stay, determined to defend his people and face his destiny. Outside the walls of Troy, Achilles and Hector finally stood face to face. The The battlefield fell silent as both armies watched the legendary warriors prepare for their final duel. The two champions fought with incredible skill, exchanging powerful blows in one of the greatest battles ever remembered in ancient history. After a fierce struggle, Achilles struck the decisive blow. Hector fell to the ground, and Troy lost its greatest defender. Inside the royal palace, King Priam, Paris, and Helen mourned the death of Hector, while sadness spread throughout the city of Troy. Although Hector had fallen, the city's massive walls still stood. In the Greek camp, Odysseus began thinking of a new strategy that relied on intelligence rather than force. Odysseus proposed building a giant wooden horse and hiding selected Greek warriors inside it, hoping the Trojans would bring it into their city. Believing this clever plan could succeed where years of fighting had failed, the Greek leaders agreed to build the wooden horse, setting the stage for the final chapter of the Trojan War. The giant wooden horse stood silently outside the gates of Troy. Believing the Greeks had abandoned the war, the people of Troy celebrated what they thought was a great victory. As music filled the streets and the celebrations continued, no one realized that Odysseus and a group of carefully chosen Greek warriors were hiding inside the hollow wooden horse. When night covered the city and the celebrations ended, Odysseus quietly opened the hidden door of the wooden horse. One by one, the Greek warriors climbed out without making a sound. Moving through the sleeping city, the warriors reached the massive gates of Troy and carefully unlocked them from the inside. Waiting beyond the walls, Agamemnon, Menelaus, and the entire Greek army silently returned under the cover of darkness. As the gates opened, thousands of soldiers entered the city. The Greeks quickly spread through the streets of Troy. The surprised Trojan defenders rushed to fight, but the attack had already caught the city completely off guard. The battle reached the royal palace, where King Priam made his final stand. Despite his courage, the ancient kingdom could no longer be saved. As flames spread across Troy, Menelaus found Helen alive within the city. After years of war, they finally left the ruined kingdom together. By sunrise, the once magnificent city of Troy had fallen. Its towering walls, grand palaces, and busy streets were reduced to smoke and ruins. The Trojan War had finally come to an end. Through patience, strategy, and the famous wooden horse, the Greeks achieved a victory that would be remembered for thousands of years. The morning sun rose over the ruins of Troy as smoke drifted through the shattered streets. The greatest city of the ancient world had finally fallen after years of war. Menelaus found Helen inside the ruined palace. After years of separation and conflict, they prepared to leave the city together and return to Sparta. At the harbor, King Agamemnon ordered the Greek army to board their ships, ending the long campaign that had begun many years before. Before sailing home, Odysseus stood quietly on the shore and looked back at Troy, reflecting on the victories, sacrifices, and countless lives lost during the war. One by one, the Greek ships raised their sails and departed from the coast, carrying the victorious army across the Aegean Sea toward their homeland. When the warriors returned to Greece, they were welcomed with great celebrations, for they had achieved one of the most famous victories in ancient history. In the years that followed, scribes carefully recorded the story of the Trojan War so that future generations would remember the heroes, the battles, and the fall of Troy. Storytellers carried the legend across the ancient world, telling of Achilles' courage, Hector's honor, Odysseus' cleverness, and the beauty of Helen. The silent ruins of Troy remained standing for centuries, reminding all who saw them of the terrible cost of war and the fate of even the greatest kingdoms. Today, the story of the Trojan War remains one of the most famous legends of the ancient world, inspiring historians, archaeologists, and storytellers more than 3,000 years later.